In this video we're going to give you an overview of the fluting toolpath and some of the different applications it can be used for. In the first example we're going to show you how to lay out three simple polylines and to create the toolpath you can see that would make the part on the screen, this simple kind of column for a mantelpiece. The second example we're going to show you how to use the fluting to create drainage channels on a cutting board. In the third example we're going to create an interesting texture. And in the last one we're going to look at how you could use the fluting to shape the top of a seat. The point of this is really just to show you the number of different ways that the fluting can be used and how the controls within it will give you different shapes dependent upon the vector layout that you have. Let's go ahead and open a copy of the software to start. For the first fluting example we're going to create some simple vectors. Let's click on the icon to create a new file. Going to set up a job which is 36 inches in X, 6 inches in Y, 1 inch thick, and we'll set the datum, the XY0 in the lower left, and hit OK. Now I want to create a series of three vectors on here. The first one I want to be 1.5 inches up from the bottom and 4 inches in from the left and 4 inches in from the right. So I'm going to click on the icon to draw a line. The first one I'm going to make start at x4, y 1.5 and hit add. You can see if I move the cursor in the 2D view it's placed that point, and now I could either click to create the other end of the line or I can very precisely enter the value for that too. And one of the ways I can do it is I know I want the other end to be 4 inches in from the right, so 4 inches in from the maximum x value in the part. So if I type in x -4, the software will know that x value is the x size of my part. When I hit equals it will calculate that coordinate for me. I can hit add and there you can see I've created that line. So if I hit close there I know this is 4 inches in from the left, 4 inches in from the right, and as I say we're 1.5 inches from the bottom edge. Now let's select that vector we just created. We'll come down to the linear array icon here. What I want to do is create 3 rows in Y, 1 column in X, and we're going to set the gap here to be X0 and Y 1.5 and go ahead and hit copy and close. And so there we've created just a simple set of 3 straight lines. So with those selected there, I'm just going to come over and click on the icon to switch to the Toolpaths tab. We could also do that with the shortcut key F12 on the keyboard. Now coming over to the Toolpaths tab, the first thing we always want to do is check our material setup. And if you plan to actually machine this or any of the examples shown in this tutorial, then it's very important that you calculate the toolpaths using parameters and settings that are safe and appropriate for your particular machine, the tooling you have available, and the material that you plan to use. Here I'm going to hit the set button. We'll just check the values. So Z0 top of the block, thickness 1, XY datum lower left. We'll just set the clearance and plunge values there and check the home position. That all looks okay, so now we can go ahead and hit the OK button. Now we can select the fluting toolpath icon here, and the first thing it'll do, like most toolpaths, is require us to enter the start depth and then the depth we want to cut to. So in this case start depth is going to be 0, or the top of the block. We'll cut down to a flute depth of, let's say, 1/4 inch. We'll leave that as it is there. And then what I want to do is select the tool. So I'm going to hit the select button, and from the tool database I want to choose a 1/2 inch ball nose for this. So a fairly large ball nose we're going to use in this case in order to create these flutes in a single pass. I'll just take the default settings for this and we'll hit the OK button. The next two sections of the toolpath form allow us to define the shape of the flute. So we have choices here of how we're going to ramp over the flute. So are we going to ramp down in a straight line from the start to the end over the complete length of that line? Are we going to ramp down just at the start here over a specified length, or are we going to ramp at the start and then ramp up at the end? And that's what I want to do in this case, so I'm going to make sure that's selected there. Then in this case we can choose how long that ramp's going to be. At the moment it's going to ramp all the way to the middle before it starts coming back up at the other end, so it'll be ramping at 100% of the length of the part. What I would like to do is control the ramp by distance in this case, so I'm going to check the option for ramp length, and we're just going to put in a length of 1 inch. Next we come down and choose the ramp type. Is it a linear ramp that will just enter our flute in a straight diagonal line and then come along and when it levels out? Or is it a smooth entry where it's going to sort of glide in a curve in so that it smoothly transitions into the bottom of our flute? In this case we'll choose the smooth option. Let's just specify the name and hit calculate, and if we just pull this around, you can see there the tool just coming down and into the job and then along in a straight line and up and out at the end. So ramping at the start and end, and each of those ramps should be 1 inch long down to a depth of 0.25. Now as normal, the toolpath doesn't show us too much of what's going to happen with the actual shape of the finished part, but the software's automatically opened the preview toolpath form, and with the toolpath selected we can click the button to preview the selected toolpath, and there when we look at that we can see the result that that's going to give us with those 3 simple straight line passes with that ball nose tool. If that looks like what we were expecting to cut, then we can close the preview and we could go ahead and save that toolpath out, choosing the appropriate post processor from the list for your machine, hitting the Save Toolpath button, and you'd actually be ready to cut that on the machine. Now if we just close the Save Toolpaths form there, let's just come up and go up to File, Save As, and we'll just call this Fluting Guide Toolpath, so you can see a copy of the file as I've created it there if you want to open that and look. And now what I'd like to do is show you 3 other examples just to really get across the power of the fluting. Although it's a very simple toolpath and you've seen how quick and easy it is to set up for an example like we've got here, there's a number of other more creative ways that you can use this fluting toolpath, and we've seen lots of evidence of this on the Vectric user forum, and I'll even be showing you one of the files that was posted on there. Let's go ahead and go up to File, Open, and we'll open our next example here. I'm going to open the file from the project folder called Cutting Board Flute Vectors and hit Open there. So this is another fairly simple set of vectors that have been drawn in the software, and we're going to use these in order to cut a set of grooves that would make sort of drainage channels for a cutting board. So really the only sort of unusual things here is this outer shape, if I click on that, is divided into 2 pieces, so that's going to cut 2 channels flowing down from the middle, out, down and round towards the right hand side. Let's go ahead and click on the icon to switch to the Toolpaths tab. Let's just check our material setup. So I'm going to set the material to be maybe 3/4 of an inch thick here. We'll go off the top of the block, lower left hand corner, and just check the other values are okay. If they are, we can hit the button there. Next I'm going to click on the icon for the fluting toolpath, and let's select the vectors that we want to cut as these drainage channels. So I'm going to click sort of in the middle of the job here and drag up towards the left and just partially select all the horizontal elements. And so as long as anything that's partially covered by the box, when we drag from the right up to the left, will get selected. Now as soon as we select those with the fluting toolpath form open, it shows me the start points as I discussed before, and I can see here that one of these lines is going in the wrong direction. We want all the flutes to go from the left to the right. This is going from the right to the left. So I need to correct that before we calculate the toolpath. So I'm just going to click in the white space to deselect those lines, select that line on its own, hit N on the keyboard for going into node editing mode. Then I'm going to come over this node at the end, see how the cursor changes, right mouse click over that and choose the option to make start point. And as well as the right mouse click option, I could have just hit the letter P on the keyboard to do that as well. Now we can see that changes to being a green square, so that shows me the starts on the left, and if I hit escape to exit node editing mode, I can click and reselect those lines, and now everything is flowing in the right direction. Now for this toolpath, I'd actually like to start a little bit below the surface, so I'm going to enter a start depth of 0.05 of an inch, Still going to go down to a flute depth of 0.25, so the total depth of cut of our flute at the deepest part will be 0.3 of an inch, 0.25 plus 0.05. I'm going to continue with the half-inch ball nose that we had selected before, but this time I want to ramp over the complete length of my line. So I'm going to choose this first option, and also I want a linear ramp, so it's just going to ramp in a straight line from the start to the end of those selected vectors. Let's change the name of the toolpath here. We'll call that Fluting Channels, hit Calculate, and there we can see in the 3D view, which automatically opens with the Preview Toolpaths form, what those toolpaths are going to look like. Again, we'll see that more clearly if we go ahead and click on the Preview Selected Toolpath button, and there we can see actually how those are going to cut and look when we machine them. If that looks correct, then we can go on and create our pocket toolpath at the end here. So let's close the Preview Toolpaths form, click on the 2D view, we'll select the vector here, and you'll note that this vector is slightly larger than the vector I used to flute there, and that's because the fluting goes on the line, and so the actual cut shape will be the radius of the tool either side of that line. So I've just taken that into account when drawing this kind of lozenge shaped vector here. With that selected, I'm going to click on the icon for the pocket toolpath. Now in here I want a start depth of 0 but a cut depth of 0.3 to match the depth that we got down to with the fluting. I'm going to select the same half-inch ball nose to pocket this out and hit OK. We'll just take the defaults, but I don't want to pocket the whole of this area with the ball nose because that will leave me with cusps in between because of the shape of the tool. So I'm actually going to use a larger area clearance tool, so I'm going to check this box here. You need to make sure that Show Advanced Toolpath Options is checked as well, and that will ensure that you can see this choice. Then we're going to click the Select button, and I'm going to choose a 1/2 inch M mill as my larger area clearance tool. So if we hit OK there, the majority of the pocket will be machined with that, and then the ball nose tool will just finish off the edges for us. Now we can see there that the ball nose is going to do this in 2 passes, the larger tool is going to do it in 1. Let's just click on Edit here for the ball nose and go ahead and enter a value there of 1/2 inch for the pass step, so it can do that in a single pass. So both of these are going to cut down to the bottom of that pocket in a single pass. That should be safe in this material. And then we're going to use an offset strategy for this. Don't need to leave any allowance. I could add ramps if I wanted to here. I'm not going to in this case. We'll just change the name and hit the Calculate button, and there we can see the 2 toolpaths that's created. One with the 1/2 inch M mill. If we hover over that, we can see that in the tooltip, and then the other one here with the 1/2 inch ball nose. So taking the 1/2 inch M mill first, we can preview the selected toolpath. Then we can select the second of the toolpaths we calculated, preview that, and see how that's going to clean up the edge for us so that we get a nice radiused edge, the same as we have for all these channels that we've cut in here as well. Now if we wanted to, we could save the toolpaths and cut this. In this case, I'm not going to save the toolpaths or the file. It'd be very easy for you to create this yourself from the vectors in the project folder there. So I'm just going to close this, and I want to show you a couple more examples, really just to show you the power of the fluting when you use it in maybe some more unexpected ways, and certainly some ways that originally we hadn't intended. So let's hit File Open, and this time I'm going to open a file called textureflutevectors.crv and hit Open. I'm not going to save the changes for that file. Now here's a set of simple straight lines that I've drawn in the software, and if I select one, you can see each of these lines is 4 inches long, and then all I've done is every other set of lines I've just moved up or down by half the length of the line. So if I select adjacent vectors, hopefully you can see there, this one starts here, this one starts here, and then so on and so forth throughout these sets of vectors. In addition, what I've done is divided these up so that every other line is on layer 1, and every other line, the longer ones there, or the ones with the extra set of lines at the top, is on layer 2. So by setting our lines out in this way, this can create some quite interesting textured effects with the Fluting Toolpath. If we click on the icon to switch to the Toolpaths tab, what I'm going to do is click on the fluting toolpath icon here. I'm going to work with a start depth of 0, flute depth of 0.25. I'm going to select a tool, and here I'm going to add a 1-inch tool into the job, a 1-inch ball nose in this case. So I'm going to select the ball nose here. We'll hit copy, select the first one in the list. I'm just going to change the name to be 1 inch, change the diameter to be 1 inch there, and hit apply and OK. Now what I want to do is select all the vectors in this case, so I'm just going to hit Control A on the keyboard, which is the shortcut key to do that, and I'm going to ramp at the start and end of each of these lines, and I'm going to ramp 100% of their length. So effectively each one is going to be cut almost with kind of a U shape or a sort of an arc or a curve, and then we'll check the smooth option here and go ahead, hit calculate. So there, if we look from the side, we can see we've got all these kind of scalloped toolpath shapes, and if we go ahead and preview that, you can see that it creates a very interesting textured effect on our part. Maybe for speed we can undraw the tool there, that will just go a little bit quicker. And by varying the depth and varying the distance between those lines would give me quite different effects with the different textures that I could create here. Another thing I can do is change the tool shape. At the moment we're using a large ball nose tool, but if I double click on this, hit select and perhaps choose a 120-degree V-bit instead, go ahead and hit OK, calculate, reset the preview, and then we'll just switch off the animation so it goes a bit quicker and preview the selected toolpath there. You'll see that that will give us quite a different effect with those settings. Again, you can play around with the spacing of the lines and the depth of cut in this in order to create quite a lot of variations on the type of texture that you're going to make. And with the way we've set this part up so that we have the alternating sets of vectors on different layers, I could even use 2 different tools to create another variation on this particular texture. If we go ahead and reset the preview there, close the preview, double click on this toolpath, I'm going to change the depth, make this a bit deeper for the V-bit tool, so 0.35, but I want to select vectors only every other set of lines. So I'm going to click on the selector button, I'm going to choose open vectors on layer 1, associate with the toolpath, close and calculate, and now we've just selected every other set of vectors or every other line. So if we preview that, we'll see what that toolpath's going to give us with the V-bit. Then I'm going to close that. I'm going to click on the fluting toolpath again. I'm going to go back to a depth of 0.25. I'm going to select the 1-inch ball nose again, and this time I'm going to use the vector selector to select vectors only on layer 2. So basically the other vectors that I didn't select with the first toolpath, go ahead and hit calculate and preview those toolpaths as well. And so you can see that's going to give us quite a different effect now because we've got the V-bit tool and the ball nose tool interacting. And again, there's really an infinite number of variations that you can create with this just by changing the spacing between the lines, the tool shape and size, the depth of cut, and just really try and experiment with this and see what you can get. So now we've looked at sort of 3 applications for the fluting. I want to open one last file and show you another type of application, and this was actually a file that originally was created by one of our user forum members, Bob Jr. So let's just hit close, file, open, and from the project folder I'm going to select seat flute vectors and hit open. I'm not going to save that file there, and here you can see that what Bob Jr. created here was a set of vectors that kind of have straight lines here and then radiate around in a circular array for sort of a semicircle and back down to another straight set of vectors. And what he designed this for was to effectively cut the shape of a seat using the fluting toolpath. So let's hit F12 on the keyboard to go over to the Toolpaths tab. We'll just double check our material setup. We'll set that to the lower left there. Everything else we may want to adjust. Go ahead and hit OK. And now I'm going to select all the vectors, so I'm going to hit Control A on the keyboard for the shortcut to do that. You could also go up to Edit and select all vectors there. I'm going to click on the Fluting Toolpath, and here you can see how these vectors have been set up. And now what we want to do is set a flute depth here for our seat shape. So in this case, maybe let's go ahead and set a flute depth for this of 0.3 of an inch. I'm going to select a 1/4 inch end mill for this, and I want to ramp over the start and end 100% smooth, and we'll just call this fluting seat and hit calculate. And if I just click and rotate that, you can see what shape that's going to give us. Now we've got quite high lifts there on this toolpath, so it may be that we'd actually want to adjust that value for a job like this. To do that, if we just close this, hit the material setup, what we may want to do is just bring our clearance and plunge values right down. If we hit OK there, OK again, click on the icon to recalculate all the toolpaths, and now you can see we've got much lower lifts at each end as this is going to move between these different flutes. Now what I want to do is click on the Preview Toolpaths icon there. With that selected, we'll preview the selected toolpath. So it'll just take a few seconds to work its way through. There's obviously quite a lot of moves there, and then you'll see in the 3D view exactly what our part would look like with that set of vectors and applying that fluting toolpath to it. So really the entire point of showing this to you is again just to point out another way that these fluting toolpaths can be used, perhaps in a slightly more unexpected way. And certainly we've seen users take these and create bowl shapes and other curved shapes in a similar method just by using these kind of arrays of quite closely situated vectors. Again, I'm not going to save this file because it'd be easy for you to load the vectors that we had there and create this yourself. But hopefully you've seen there really what a powerful tool the Fluting Toolpath is, and some of the different ways you can use it, and would encourage you to explore that and try out different things yourselves. And that concludes this video.